I have over $1 million invested right now, and to be honest, it's not quite what I thought it would be. Today, I want to have a really honest conversation around what it looks like to have $1 million, how that really rolls out, and what kind of impact it has on my day-to-day life and my long-term life, and why I'm not exactly about to retire. I just want to acknowledge the immense privilege that is having that money and access to those investments before we get into it, because I am going to talk about this from, the other side of things, and I don't want to downplay that so much that it sounds ridiculous, like I'm acting like $1 million isn't any money. But I also want to show the other side, because I think when I had this goal of really hitting $1 million net worth, I thought that millionaire meant you're living on a yacht, you're like hanging out with celebrities every day. I really thought a millionaire was a certain type of lifestyle. And while there's some question mark truth in that, I just want to show what it really looks like, and the good and the bad, and kind of how that rolls out. I really feel like collectively we have this cultural obsession with $1 million. And I think a lot of it is similar to those thoughts that I have. We may be associated with a status or a particular lifestyle where we think everything changes and, time freezes and it just turns into rainbows and butterflies when we hit that millionaire status. There's something about the fact that it's a far away enough number that it feels like a big scary goal you can go after, while simultaneously maybe you know enough people or a few people in your life who have achieved that, or maybe some people on the internet, that it feels like something you can go after, versus saying, I want to make $100 million in my lifetime. In that scenario, you're probably building a startup, whereas more average people, ambitious people that aren't going completely hardcore, can still chase that $1 million milestone. I know for myself, I met someone when I was probably in middle school that had achieved millionaire status by 30. And I just thought that was so crazy. I don't even know if I understood what that meant, but I thought it was such a cool thing to really, set as my North Star to chase. But ironically, I actually never really thought I would do that by 30. I thought you had to pull off something absolutely insane to do it. So one of my first lessons was definitely figuring out that it was more achievable than I thought it was. I feel like I was using it as that North Star of how can I get as close as possible to his age of 30. I thought maybe it would be 40. I'm like, can I maybe shave off a few years? But I didn't even know it was realistic for someone like me to achieve. I also feel like I just had this obsession with doing things while I was young. I remember thinking like, I have to start a business. I have to accomplish all these things when I'm young, because every year you get older, it's less impressive. And I mean, that's probably just its own thing that I need to unpack sometime. Now, obviously, accomplishing this was really exciting. And I remember as it got closer, I hadn't been investing for that long. It really spoke to me about the compounding effect of investing, because it was only a few years earlier that I had really started investing. And then I remember at 29, looking at the numbers and being like, oh my gosh, I'm actually maybe going to pull this off, which just felt insane. And it felt so surreal to, accomplish that goal of $1 million net worth. But I also remember just immediately being so passionate about showing people that like, wait, this isn't what I thought it would be. And I thought it was so important, and not in a like, this isn't good enough kind of way, but in that we should all be hitting that $1 million net worth. And then also that it's not exactly what I thought it would be. I think that's the really interesting thing with goals in general, but especially this $1 million number that we have in our head, is that on paper, you're maybe tying that goal to something so much bigger than what it is. And then when you actually get there, you're like, okay, so that's kind of just a number on paper, and what do I actually do with that, right? So to be clear, you can't, pay your bills with your net worth specifically. Net worth is kind of all of your assets minus what you owe. So that can include real estate. For myself, that has real estate, it has stock investments, it has a startup investment, cash, and like business equity, business value, like what your business would be worth. One thing that was really important to me on that journey was once I hit that $1 million net worth status, it's so interesting how quickly we evolved those goals. And for me, it was definitely still chasing a sense of security, that I feel like when I set that $1 million goal, I thought that it would come with so much security, and then quickly realized that it didn't necessarily have that guaranteed. So then I shifted from that $1 million net worth goal to actually having $1 million invested, which is essentially just taking out things like my business value and my cash. I didn't really want to count those things because neither of those things felt promised. The cash felt like I'm probably going to use it to, whether it's in my business or personally. And then the business value is just so hard to gauge, especially in a business like mine, where realistically you're probably at most going to sell like your email list and your website, like the assets of your business. And it's not necessarily something where you can turn around and say, hey, this is very clearly worth this. There are a lot of equations you can use to figure out the value of your business if you do want to have that rough number, but it just became important to me that it was just through real estate, stock market, crypto, angel investing was kind of on the side, but investment wise, I wanted to very clearly have that million. Angel investment is kind of that tricky one because yes, it is an investment and you're hoping for it to 10x, but also I can't turn around and take my money back. I'm not really gaining on money until that company sells. So it's really the stock market side of things and real estate. Okay, but what I want to talk about is what that breakdown looks like, because I think there's some misconceptions that, like I said, it's all tied up. But also on the flip, I feel like people either think it's completely tied up or that it's completely cash. Like I think that I believed being a millionaire, having $1 million meant you have $1 million in the bank. Like you have access to $1 million, almost like your baseline, like your emergency fund, which is also not true, right? So for myself, at least, it's about 65% in stocks and crypto, 32% in real estate, and about 3% in other investments like the angel investing. That 65% in stocks and crypto is actually fairly liquid. In my business, I have investments that I could pull from. In my personal life, I have a tax-free savings account between my TFSA and RSP as a Canadian. But that is kind of liquid that I could touch. And so while you have access technically to these investments, the way that I see it is every time I want to borrow from that, dip into it, use it, that affects future me. And so that for me is really hard. So I almost to a fault feel like a failure if I have to take it. Once I put money into my investments, I am not touching it until later. Now I've opened my eyes a little bit that, there might be ways or reasons to take it out that could be strategic for other investments if I'm going to put that money somewhere else. But in general, like once you hit that $1 million, it's not like you're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna just start taking it out now and it's just gonna forever replenish. If I dip into it, it affects future me and it affects the lifestyle that I want moving forward, which I don't want to do. That's what I'm really working toward. I do feel like you can't stay a millionaire if you're constantly taking from it. So that is part of, like that reason alone is partially why I can't retire, because I don't feel like if I start taking from it now that I will be able to have the same lifestyle in the future. The interesting thing when you just look at the math of it all too is that $1 million, I hate to say it, but it's not what it used to be. I remember I even read something recently that said right now minimum wage would have to be $66 an hour to even match like the home buying purchasing power of our parents' generation, which just shows you how much money really changes over time. So I think the same way that 100K salary mark that a lot of people chase, 100K salary doesn't go as far as it used to. I also think that's true of like $1 million invested. So definitely the cost of living has gone up, and I think that's part of where $1 million doesn't stretch as far. Obviously, the simple math of me being 32 and $1 million having to last the rest of my life is also a little bit of the problem. Even though we're gonna have that compounding growth from investing, it's still honestly just not quite enough. The other thing I factor in to $1 million not being enough today is that I think our generation, at least me and my partner, we want to experience life in a different way. And I think we put so much more value in different types of experiences. I think generations before us, they really enjoyed like the little moments sitting on the porch with the neighbors, and there's a lot of beauty in that. But I think with social media, we've been exposed to so much more of the world, and it's also meant that we've seen so many different ways people live their lives, but also so many different countries, and like you're seeing it more up front. It's not that you're buying a tour guide book to get exposed to these cultures. You're maybe opening up TikTok or Instagram or YouTube and you're seeing someone vlogging in these other countries. And for us, that really makes us want to go see the world. It makes us want to have these really cool experiences even when we're in those different places. And so I think when I look at the life that I want to live, that's a big part of why I can't retire with $1 million, because I simply want to have all the experiences. And I think our generation values those experiences so much more, which is why we have this part of why we have this craving for more when it comes to the financial side too. I also think if you try to look at it from the 4% rule, which is where a lot of people, take their investments, pull 4% each year. And the idea is that your investments will keep compounding and growing, largely somewhat unaffected, where you can essentially never run out of money. That's the short version of it. But let's say we were looking at that. With $1 million invested, the 4% rule would essentially come out to taking out $40K a year. And while that's great to be making passive, I simply don't want to live off only $40K a year right now. With the way that my portfolio is set up too, I think for myself, it would end up right now, if I took it, being closer to $30K a year. And for me, there's this difference between can I survive off of it and can I thrive off of it? I think if we were looking very technically speaking, I could potentially retire right now and live a very lean, budgeted life, expecting kind of that $30K a year. It doesn't leave a lot of room for when the market goes up and down, and it doesn't give me a lot of security with my other investments like real estate. But I guess you could say it's maybe possible. But here's why I can't do it. Because I don't want to live off $30K a year, and I think that's a very valid point. I think everything I've done to date has been pretty ambitious, and it's just, I have that drive in me that I really want to experience more from life, and I want these versions of success and just personal memories and experiences that I want to collect. That $30K a year won't do it. For me, thriving and financial freedom looks like not having to aggressively budget or stay super lean or always be paying attention to my money. I want to go get groceries and I want to buy the cheese I want to buy without looking at the price tag. I want to be able to take my family on trips. I want to have that kind of financial freedom where money isn't controlling every decision. And so while maybe you could technically retire off something like $30K a year, for me, it almost feels like I'm climbing this mountain of each year we're experiencing more, we're traveling more, we're having cooler hotels, we're doing things like we have a cleaner and we didn't have that 5 years ago. These little things that are upgrading in our life, that's really this intentional lifestyle creep. And then if I were to retire, all of a sudden I'm back to the bottom where I can't afford a lot of those things, or maybe I really have to squeeze my budget and live life differently. And then what's the point? Some people, they love that kind of retirement. There's a lot of people in the FIRE community, the financial independence, retire early, where they keep that lean life and it's really satisfying to them. But I just know myself enough to know that I want those experiences to continue to tenfold. I've seen what it's done for me every time I've been able to compound those experiences, and I just really want to continue with that. And it's just simply not enough for current me or future me. I know at 40, I don't want to be living off 30 to 40K as well. Now, one interesting thing when I look at the math is if I were to start taking my 4% closer to 40, that would actually look more like 65K a year. This is assuming we average 10% returns on the stock market, but it would be around that. And that starts to feel a little more manageable, because if you don't have necessarily the business expenses, maybe at 40, I'm not living in a city downtown like Toronto. But I think that's something I could start to wrap my head around. So while that $1 million might not feel in my life like enough to retire now, I love that it's giving me options and opportunities to explore how I could still retire early, or just live a life that feels more secure. And so that all of my work money is going towards other things. But no matter what, I would know that I'm covered by my passive income when it comes to things like bills. Okay, now one interesting thing that I just started playing with literally yesterday is this idea of what if I did start taking the 4% annually, but then instead of using that money for my base expenses, what if I invested it in higher risk, more interesting, higher risk, high reward type projects? So whether that's putting money into a startup, maybe partnering on a new venture, or going after an industry that needs a little more capital up front, or even winterizing our cottage, what if we pulled that from the investments to really put it into a different investment spot? And it's something I haven't really seen a lot of people talk about with the 4% rule, since it's usually about retiring early, but it's something I'm gonna noodle on more, and I will keep you posted on some thoughts there. But curious if you have any thoughts, or if you know someone that's done that, or just if that sparks anything for you, feel free to share it. Please, 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 please message me on Instagram or just comment it on this video. Now, even though this doesn't cover my current life to want to retire on just that 30K a year and for the foreseeable future, I do think what it provides is really that gap to go from that survival mode to that thrive mode. I am someone that has battled a lot of scarcity, especially being self-employed and on the online space. There's just so many highs and lows to it. There's so many opportunities, but there's also so many crashes that I feel like having this amount invested is really powerful this year, especially I'm feeling it in making me realize I can take risks. I can trust myself to build the things that I want to do, and I do have that backup if I need it. I mentioned I almost like to a fault will set it and forget it, if you will, where once I put that money in an investment account, to me, it's gone. Like it belongs to 40-year-old me who has a password that I don't have the password to access it. Even though that's not true at all, I could take it out tomorrow if I wanted to. I think that's been really impactful in getting me to this position. So it's a trait that I'm not necessarily looking to get rid of. But I also think now I've opened up to, okay, I have enough there that it can give me that security later. It can give me some security now, and it can give me that peace of mind to really take bigger risks, to think about, are there big business ideas I want to pursue? Is there something that might take more capital? And can I do that knowing that, I can risk it with this much money, knowing I have this other money backing me up? And the really cool thing with compounding too is, right now it's this amount. It will continue to grow if you don't touch it. So that makes the risks less risky, but it also means it's naturally moving upward in your favor. Even though I said now, it's given me that peace of mind to maybe slow down a bit, think about what are those big things I want to do next, take a risk in a business, partner on a different type of venture or experiment a little bit. It's also taken me a minute to get here because I feel like ever since I hit it, until about mid this year, which honestly would be, if we're going for $1 million net worth, like the math, 2 years, I feel like I have just been in this place of being so scared to take my foot off the gas, because we all know that being in survival mode can be a really scary place, but for a lot of us, it lights a different kind of fire under our butt, and then you figure it out. I feel like I've been living in this place where it feels like it's like what I want and what I need is right there, and all I have to do is not mess it up. I kind of call it the gap right now of like, I just have to be able to get to that future age where I know I should be okay if I don't mess it up, but that requires, making enough money to continue those investments or making enough money to not have to take from it, taking those risks, but knowing that some of them might not work out, but hoping that they work out so it's not having a drastic impact on what you've achieved. So for me, it's kind of that emotional trap of it feels really surreal to accomplish it. And then all of a sudden it feels really scary and really risky. And you're worried about losing something because it feels so much worse to be like, we did it, I did this thing. And then 5 or 10 years from now, realize I messed it all up. And I think that weighs on me a lot, and it's something I'm working on separately. But it is a different kind of emotional trap. This might also be because even though stocks is the higher percentage of my portfolio right now, we do have 3 properties, and sometimes I feel like having that real estate aspect, it has a lot of different advantages, which we've talked about before, but it has a different kind of pressure on it because in my mind, at the end of the day, we have 3 mortgages to pay. And yes, we have tenants in 2 of those properties. And yes, we are doing a short-term rental with one of them. But at the end of the day, things can happen in all these scenarios, and we still owe that money. We still owe those mortgages. And so the logical side of my brain can, tie, okay, this person's rent is gonna cover this. But I also know in the background that people screw this up. People own properties and then all of a sudden are going into debt or bankruptcy and have to sell them off. So I think, those headline stories of how people mess up a good thing that they had really stick with me. And so I'm really focused on, yeah, maybe I can't retire right now. And maybe if it was more money, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't, because I do love having impact and, you know, fulfilling that purpose. But what I do want to really lean into is that where I have gotten myself with my investments means I can take risks and I can do things a little differently. And I feel like I'm still processing that part for sure. It's also been really interesting how it's played a role with my scarcity and me just really learning the value of a dollar, because I feel like seeing this money grow has really shown me that it's worth investing this money. And so every year I keep an emergency fund. For me, it's in my business. And I feel like each year I'm letting it be smaller and smaller. I still tend to want to keep about a year's worth of salary in my business to be safe. Even though I don't pay myself out a crazy amount, I just want to know that my business and my personal bills are covered if for some reason the rug gets pulled out for me, whether that's in my business or maybe personally something happens that I can't focus on my business. But seeing the impact of my investments has encouraged me to get more comfortable with that amount being smaller, because I do have access to that money that's invested. So slowly learning that, you know, it's sitting in maybe a savings account, even if it's a high interest savings account, it could be doing a lot more for me in my investments. And so that has actually helped with my scarcity in realizing like, okay, you can let go here and let it go do its job in a way that it needs to do. But this can also mean that you can fixate on how much you're contributing and really trying to chase that next contribution milestone, because I think like a lot of us, if we're ambitious, it's kind of that never-ending moving goalpost. And so this year I've been looking a lot at, does the goalpost ever just stay still, or does it stay still temporarily? I think for me, having those next milestones really excite me and it does drive me. But sometimes I feel like I'm so focused on how much more we can invest that I want to make sure that I'm still living. And that doesn't mean that I'm working 24/7. I think I have a good balance in the day-to-day, that I really do live and just enjoy the day-to-day life. But it's things like taking a 3 or 4 week trip, going to Asia, which we really want to plan, those kind of trips where I need to believe that I can take those breaks or I can take that chunk of money and the investments are going to be just fine. Now, I hope that this has helped show you a realistic side of what really being a millionaire looks like. It's a word that I don't even use because in my head, I still have it as that like Jeff Bezos status, Taylor Swift in my head, that was millionaire life, celebrity yacht parties. And so I still kind of disassociate from that term, partially intentionally because I do think so many people have this association with it that I don't think is what I'm living. But also partially unintentionally in that I just feel phony saying it, and I'd much rather say I have $1 million invested, which is kind of ironic because $1 million invested is almost like passing the threshold of what makes you a millionaire. But for some reason, for me, that feels more truthful than just saying millionaire. This just gives us a little glimpse of how much our own language and perspective on money comes into play with all of this. I definitely don't want you to think that $1 million invested or a millionaire status, $1 million net worth, whatever the thing is that really motivates you is no longer worth chasing, because absolutely it's been one of the best things I could do for myself, especially at, I would say, a young age. I think I will look back even on this video and not even understand how maybe silly I sound in this, still having the worries and fears, because I think I have done so much for future me that I can't even see yet. And so I'd really encourage you to still chase that goal. I just want to show you the other side of, yeah, it's not this big bucket of cash. You probably won't retire the second you hit it, but it will teach you so much about your financial literacy. At least for myself, it has helped me just think so creatively. I talk a lot about how money is just creative problem solving. And so I'm actually super excited. I've been playing more and more with these projections of, you know, do I start pulling 4% at 40? What would that look like with my real estate properties? When will we start making more of a profit off of that? And how will that play in? And I really want to build that life that I don't feel like I have to retire from. I want to do the work that fuels me, but I also want to feel so secure in that. And I really am striving for that place where my passive income can cover my bills. I just know that when I get there, which is probably half what I'm doing now too, that I will still look for other ways to cover the bills so the investments can grow and grow. I really know that there's going to be so many next chapters for us that I want to be able to take even bigger risks every year. But truly, even though it might not be enough on paper to retire at 32, I am so grateful for my younger self working towards this. I'm so grateful for my current self giving me some grace in it. And I am just really excited for what that milestone will eventually lead to. And I'm also really excited for you if you are on an investing journey. And I hope that this encouraged you to go after that $1 million goal post, but also see the other side of it and know that life doesn't end, or life doesn't, there's not just a cannonball of confetti and then you've done it. So if you're chasing that $1 million and feeling like it's going to fix all your problems, feeling like everything is going to magically fall into place, it won't. There is life after it. There is a lot to do after it still. But maybe you're somebody who you can live off the 30K, and maybe that would make you really happy. And I would love to hear about your life if that is what you are doing. So even though I might not be retiring at 32 because I have $1 million invested, I am so excited for the journey that it is bringing me on. And I really hope it inspires you to go after that $1 million investment milestone, or maybe even more.